There you go. Yo, what's happening, all you badass mofos out there in the Black Army radio realm? Welcome back, or if you're new here, welcome to the movement, baby. Before we get started, if you think this show's worth a damn, please, it helps us a lot. Give us that 5-star rating. Really appreciate it. If you think there's an episode or an investigation or an interview that's worth a damn, send it to a friend. That helps a hell of a lot too. And it is freaking Thursday the 13th, Joel, Thursday the 13th. Here's what we're going to do today. Okay. We're going to get into, well, we may or may not actually, because we got a little bit of current event stuff that we always freaking do. Joel's got some stuff on historical biblical writings and publications and teachings and what all that means and like how that's kind of been changed, manipulated over time, kind of like how we were talking about with the Book of Enoch, right? How the Book of Enoch was canon. Long before the Council of Nicaea kind of decided that it wasn't, and we had all this in the last episode. So if you haven't listened to the last the last 3 episodes before you get to this one, I would recommend it, because this one we're going to get into, and I'm not sure if we're going to get this deep. We'll see. We actually kind of have a hard time. We have a hard out today because Joel and I both got some stuff we got to do here in about like an hour and a half that we can't get out of, and so normally what we'd be doing is I'd be moving from freaking the Book of Enoch. We talked about the Book of Enoch last episode exclusively, and then going into the Sumerian kings list and the Apkapulu traditions that are associated with that, and the Hindu traditions, the Greek traditions, the Native American traditions, all talking about, pre-flood teachers that taught humanity all kinds of shit that they didn't know before. And they would be called sages in some cultures. They're called fallen angels in some cultures. They're actually considered like in some other cultures, like if you think about the Sumerians and the Anunnaki, right? Like, I don't know how the Anunnaki would be different than the Watchers, because they were basically like gods from a different planet, almost like UAP. Right. We're going to get into a little bit of how this all connects to modern day UAP, UFO mythology, shit like that. And so, anyway, before we do that, Joel, what's happening, buddy? How you doing?
Doing good, man. Just watching the world burn, dude. But doing good.
Again.
Yeah.
Actually, you know what? Yeah. Like, what I'm seeing really interesting out there, and this is what we're going to riff off of here in a minute. I got a video, dude, or audio clip that we're going to play here. It's about a minute. There was like a few months ago, we talked about morale in the U.S. military. Remember that shit? We talked about what it was like, the morale in the U.S. military not being like at the best point right now. And a lot of it was because, well, the Iran war was kicking off. There was stuff happening to our military bases that they weren't being honest about. And there was also all that Christian nationalism, Zionist propaganda that was happening way up high on the chain of command in the Navy, the Army, the Air Force, basically saying that this war was going to be fought to bring about the second coming of Jesus Christ for Christians, or the original Messiah for Judaism. You know what I mean? And about how all of that stuff was connected, and morale in the military, like there is, like, through UCMJ, if you're a soldier or sailor, Marine, whatever, airman, you have the ability to complain about things like this. And there were more reports filed like within the military complaining about things like that than basically any other time in freaking history. Any other time basically in history. And so we have a perfect example right now of what morale is like in the U.S. Navy, because there's a ship out there that hasn't docked or hasn't done anything for almost an entire year. And there's sailors, dude, this is fucking, there's sailors that are jumping off of carriers into the ocean. I mean,
yeah, I mean,
I don't know how you get to the point.
Just,
I mean, bro, I can't. Listen, I wasn't in the Navy, homie. Wasn't in the Navy. Didn't do a float. Don't know what it's like. But I've talked to a lot of dudes that were. You know what I'm saying? And especially a lot of guys on the teams, because I didn't, regular Navy guys, not so much, but guys in the teams I had conversations with about what it's like to be on a float, be on those Navy boats, and how long those periods are. And they'll usually go like before docking, they'll usually go like 30 to 45 days before, and they'll dock. You know what I mean? And then they'll resupply. They freaking go out, run around, like I'll do all the shit that the Navy's notorious for in all these different islands and all these different places. You know what I'm saying? And dude, this ship hasn't docked or done anything for almost a year, and they're completely running out of supplies. Like, there's reports from people's, as a matter of fact, there was a wife who reported that she had just received a message from her husband who's on the ship. I want to say it's the USS Liberty, and I might be fucking wrong because we'll find out here in a minute. But that her husband had sent her a message that said, I don't want to wake up in the morning. If I like, disappointed. Right. But his mind and mental space is so bad right now that he doesn't want to wake up in the morning. And there's a whole bunch of sailors sending out these messages to like their loved ones through email and like phone calls, satellite phones and stuff like that. Dude, the morale is like rock bottom, isn't it? It's like lower than rock bottom. You got people jumping off of carriers into the ocean, right, bro. Like, what's your plan?
Yeah, it wasn't.
What's your fucking plan?
Wasn't it like four reported people or something like that? Like there was at least one for sure.
So I'm gonna play this damn clip, dude, and we're just gonna riff off of it. Okay.
You guys, there's a mental health crisis happening aboard the USS Lincoln in the Middle East that no one is talking about, and mainly because the Navy's pretty much quashing it. You will read online about food shortages, supply shortages, poor morale among crew members. That's because they've been at sea continuously for 250 days. They've been deployed a total of 271 days, 250 without a port of call. That's unheard of. Normally, they would go to port every 3 to 6 weeks. They have not been to port in 38 weeks. Keep in mind, there are 52 weeks in a year. And yes, the showers are moldy. They are eating basically like a gruel kind of slop at this point. There's no deodorant. There's no toothpaste. My nephew has a friend on board there, and I was basically hearing updates last week when I was in the States in real time. They're not talking about the mental health crisis. 6 people have tried to jump off that ship. The most recent was last Monday. You know, when you have not touched land in 38 weeks, in over 200 days, things start to happen to you mentally. You know, combine that with exhaustion and deadly mistakes start to happen. So, you know, this is how the Department of War, this is how Donald Trump treats our servicemen and women whose lives are already being put in harm's way for a bullshit war of aggression that was supposed to be over in a matter of weeks. We are further putting their lives at risk out of sheer ineptitude and neglect. It defies logic, it defies reason, and it defies basic fucking humanity.
Dude, 6. So there's been 6 people that have tried to jump off. Was it the USS Lincoln? I think you said the USS Lincoln. I think I called it the USS Liberty earlier, but I think it was the Lincoln. 6 people, dude. They don't have fucking toothpaste. They don't have food. Like, they're covering, just like how they're not being honest about our casualty list either. They're not being honest about our casualty list. And these kids that are out there, like, you know what, dude, real quick. I remember when I was just a knuckle dragger, right? And the reason that I loved Fox News so much was because as the war went on and it kept going on and on and on, like a lot of other news outlets started to be like, wait a minute, why are we fighting this war? Like, what are we really doing? Like, is the Iraq war, you know what I mean? Like, this is dragged on. It's costing thousands of lives. It's trillions of dollars, blah, 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 blah. And then I saw it as like not supporting the troops. You know what I'm saying? Because it was like, I was one of the troops and I took it personally because I took the mission seriously. You know what I'm saying? And so because of that, I gravitated to Fox News, which was always support the troops, no matter what, support the troops, support the mission, support the troops. If you don't support the mission, you don't support the troops, you're fucking anti-American, you're a traitor, you're all this, that, and the other thing. And it was like, there was never a question about the mission. And now, as I've gotten older, bro, like supporting the troops doesn't mean that you blindly support the mission and you just support the death of troops because they died, and now you're going to support more aggression so you have more troop casualties. And somehow that is supporting the troops. That's what supporting the troops actually means. Because these guys are out there right now, and they're sucking it up. And you got 6 guys on an aircraft carrier. Aircraft carriers are high off the water. Really high off the water. You know what I'm saying? It's fucking suicidal, bro. To have 6 guys at 6 different points jump off an aircraft carrier because the morale and whatever's happening there is so fucking bad that you have 6 dudes wanting to do that. And then you have all of these people talking about supporting the war, supporting the troops, this, that, and the other thing, dude, that will not talk about this. There's no way this will hit mainstream news, especially on like Fox News. You know what I mean? That is a constant perennial just war propagandist machine.
The bigger picture in all of this is like the turnover, what's happened within the military. I'm pretty sure the top naval commander retired or was forced out. I mean, there was so much turnover there. You're talking about Hegseth, who him and Trump of late have supposedly been arguing over the uses of missiles and us running out on our ammunitions and stuff, you know? And this just goes to show, like, when you remove all the leadership that's been there for 20, 30 fucking years, this is what you're left with. You know, the leader of any navy thing, especially if they weren't doing anything besides holding a presence, he would find a way to rotate another ship in there or personnel or find a way to dock. You know, they're not doing anything. They're sitting out in the middle of the ocean, you know, and these guys are losing their fucking mind. There's probably a good percentage of them are questioning, like, what the fuck are we doing actually? Like, what are we doing here? You know? And it's, I think the bigger picture is like the leadership that has been removed from the military since Trump's candidacy. And it sounds like between us running out of ammunition on a war that's not even a war that we've won fucking 52 times since it started and has ended another fucking 51 times, you know, like it's a dog and fucking pony show, dude. And there, it seems like there's not an adult in the room, and maybe there's a, you know, and that's like the biggest thing.
And then you got to worry about the leadership that's still there, because like there's a lot of people, man, you're not going to throw away your career. You know what I'm saying? Like, you're not going to, like, I talked about what a dishonorable discharge meant, dude. A dishonorable discharge is the same as being a felon. You're never going to get a job, state, federal job. Definitely not. I mean, having a dishonorable discharge is a really, really freaking big deal. Really, really big deal. It basically screws up the entire rest of your life. You know what I'm saying? And so it's like, you got guys in there in charge now, man, that are in a real catch-22 because they're watching their crews not digging what's happening. Borderline, I guarantee you, if you got 6 people jump off and the conditions are that bad on that ship, that they got a borderline mutiny going on that ship. You know what I'm saying? Because remember the other ship that they had to take in for repairs? Remember what all the sailors were doing? They were flushing socks and underwear down the shitters so they would clog up the shitters so they would have to go port and fix it and have repairs. They did it on purpose. Like, that's like a mutiny, dude, within the Navy. Having something like that happen within a structured element like the United States Navy, where it is extremely structured and you have an entirely different disciplinary system than you do in the civilian world, an entirely different fucking disciplinary system. It's an authoritarian dictatorship in the U.S. military. It's not a goddamn democracy. You know what I'm saying? Like, you don't have the rights in the military, like under the chain of command, as you do as a citizenry.
I think this also goes to like Trump trying to, whether it's a program through the government, like fucking something up bad enough until it breaks to prove that you need to do something else. And I think a lot of that is Trump's, like, he's, in this instance, he's like weeding out the people who don't believe in his cause. And that's why so many generals and people who've been in the military forever were retiring, because he's essentially putting the pressure on them to be put in such a corner where they don't have any other option to be besides like, I want to fucking quit, you know? And some people would say like that's what we need to harden our military. But I also, if the things are as good as they say they are, this is a failure. And if things are as bad as we think they are, our military is an embarrassment at this point. And I'm not talking about the individual soldiers going out there and fighting this war. I'm talking about the leadership in this presidency is what I'm talking about, you know? And
dude,
and
it really makes me worried if there's ever like,
going back to your point.
Oh, go ahead. You go ahead, buddy.
I just want to make sure people know, like, this is never against somebody who is a soldier. Like, I'm talking shit about leadership. I want our soldiers to come home. I don't want them fighting in a war like this. I think it's great that we have a strong military, but I think it's great that we have a strong America, and this isn't leading to a strong America. None of this is helping us become a stronger country. And if anything, it's depleting our military. If something outside of this is to happen, we don't have the ammunition to fight it. We're defenseless with our ammunition at this point. Like, if we had to go fight another war right now, we couldn't.
Yeah, man. It makes me worried about, like, if it ever gets to the point where there is a ground invasion for some reason, if they pull the trigger on a ground invasion, and I mean, it's so hot and cold of whether or not they were going to do that, dude. I mean, I don't think we have the munitions anymore to support our like invading troops because of, I mean, dude, the topography of Iran, it's a nightmare, bro. It's a nightmare. I mean, it's dude, bogged down. I mean, it would be a no shit, like Ukraine, Russia style, Vietnam style war. You know what I mean? Big time.
Right.
And it's like we're running that low on munitions, and the morale in the military is already this bad, and the general public this is the most anti the general public has ever been for an American war in, like, American history. You know what I'm saying? I mean, it's never been above water since day one, and it's way, 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 way underwater now. It's like, I mean, it would just, dude, I would feel fuck. I mean, for the guys that, God, I mean, it's like, what are you fighting for? What are you dying? What are you like? It's we live in the land of mass media now. Like, all these soldiers, Navy, sailors, Marines, airmen, like, they all have access to information like we do. They see it. They see the forest through the trees. You got guys out there that are still serving, dude, that have talked to me about the fact that they're gonna fucking, if they go to war, they think they're going to war for Israel. If they die, they think they're dying for Israel. I mean, these are guys that are still serving, dude. These are guys that are still in the game. And it's like their perception of what they're doing in the U.S. military has completely changed over the last 20 years. I mean, these are guys that are 20 years plus in. You know what I mean? These are dudes that spent 20 years in a tier 1 or a tier 2 special operations unit that are saying stuff like this, that are basically being like, dude, it's taken me 20 fucking years and a shit ton of combat deployments and a shit ton of thinking to get to this point to where I understand where we're actually at and what we're actually doing. You know what I mean? And if you don't think you are doing it for the benefit of the Republic, for the benefit of your people, and now you actually genuinely believe you're either doing it for another state or you're literally doing it for an oligarchical class that, quite frankly, does not give a fuck about whether you live or die, does not give a fuck about whether you live or die. That changes you, like, it changes your soul, bro, especially if you've stacked bodies for that belief. You know what I mean? If you've done stuff that you have regrets about, like stuff that sits with you, haunts you forever, for your whole life, those kind of memories are gonna have a different meaning if you think that you did all that stuff for something that didn't actually matter or wasn't what you actually thought it was for. Right. I think the Vietnam guys, that's why they had such a hard time as they got older. You know what I mean? Because it became more and more apparent that what they did over there was not for what the fuck they thought it was for. And so we're getting that more now. And if we're seeing it, dude, in the younger generation of soldiers, sailors, Marines, and airmen, be goddamn sure that the older generation is already way ahead of them. Way ahead of them. You know what I mean? And so, bro, that stuff's heartbreaking, dude. I don't know what to think. It's just, it makes me really, really despise our leadership, including the leadership on that ship, man.
Yeah.
Like, what the fuck? If you're the admiral of that ship, or you're running that ship, or you're one of the, like, what are you doing? What are you doing? Like, what the fuck are you actually doing right now? Supporting this and staying out there and doing this and just knowing that your entire crew is mutinying, that people are trying to commit suicide off the side of their ship, that they don't have food, they don't have toothpaste. I guarantee that probably stink. Can you imagine how bad it probably stinks in some places on that ship?
Well, and
I mean, probably really
and
fucking
with
bad.
Like, I want to know if they're doing anything? Like, have they sent any missiles at drones, or are they literally just sitting there? Like, how much are their skills being applied? Because at least if you're doing something, like, the boredom isn't killing you. But if they're literally have been there and sent 3 missiles out since they've been sitting there, and I don't know any of those, but, like, why haven't you ported yet? Do they need to be out there for 220 fucking days, Like, yeah, it just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, man. And I don't, it's hard to tell what they're doing. Here's the thing too. They're not that close to Iran because Iran has capabilities to hit our shit. You know what I mean? Because they can hit Israel, they can hit freaking Saudi Arabia. They're hitting all these places. So all of our ships are way, way, way back. That's why every time we launch a sortie mission set, they got to be refueled in the air, just like we were talking about at the beginning of the war. I mean, we had troops in Jordan killed. You know what I mean? They were hitting Jordan. It's like I don't know what the fuck they're doing out there, bro. I mean, they might be sending some, but the thing about it is too is our munition supply is so low now that they're not even really doing that. Dude, it's
right,
bro. When I heard that this morning, that little audio clip, man, about how bad it really was, dude, and about the fact that there's loved ones that are reporting now to the news networks that they're getting calls saying that they're suicidal, that their husbands are suicidal, and it like don't want to get up in the morning, don't even want to wake up because they just want to be dead, literally be dead. I mean, because the conditions are so fucking bad on that ship, and they're metal. I mean, I don't know, man. It's I don't know. I don't know how you come out of that. I don't know how you make that right. I really don't. I think the U.S. our leadership is just really fucked the pooch on that one, dude. Really fucked the pooch. And so,
yeah.
Anyway, that's about all I got for fucking news, bro. You got anything else for news, or should we just get in? I feel like we should get into your stuff on the Book of Mary and like some of the other stuff you were talking about, and we can kind of just riff off that a little bit because it's just the same old same with the news, dude. Like it's just the same old same, man. There's a political reckoning happening in the United States. Like there's an anti-flock camera movement happening in the United States that's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. The database stuff, people still getting arrested for bullshit. Like man, it's just that's all we've been saying for a while now, and I feel like it's definitely not getting better. It's definitely not getting better. It's getting worse, and we're getting more bullshit shoved down our throat, more propaganda shoved down our throat, and man,
and
we're in like I keep saying, we're in a dangerous place.
I mean, and just like the protections that have. I'm not saying every regulation is a good thing. I'm not Mr. Let's regulate everything, but like we have deregulated a lot of stuff that comes to our health and our drinking water. Now we're allowing these companies who are poisoning our water, like Monsanto, to essentially get away with it without being sued now. Like we gave big farm and corporations immunity against fucking us up. And I just like any protections that or repercussions that we could take in the future against this have been removed. So now we're going to have to spend more time at the highest level of politics, spending our tax money, rewriting these laws. And next, it's just fucking retarded, and this is another point, and this is going to be a random tangent. But with, so Trump has sued a lot of people for defamation. He sued ABC News. He sued all these people, right? Know who he hasn't sued? Any of the Epstein people who've said that they reported him sexual abuse. Want to know why? Because they would have to do due diligence and they'd have to look at the facts, and those facts would be public knowledge. That's why he hasn't sued anybody. Trump's been sued and sued people more than any other president ever has, and he's scared to sue anything with the Epstein stuff. Because why? Because they will prove that what the people are saying wasn't slander. It wasn't misinformation, and that's another point, which is I wish people would just fucking, and a lot of people know this already. It's just fucking annoying. Yeah.
No, that's a really good.
Anyways,
it's a really good point, dude. It's a really good point, and I've thought about that a lot for a lot of different reasons. I think about RFK Jr. Listen, you could hate RFK Jr. out there if you want. That's fine. It's this is not a promotion of his ideology, but I'm just saying when he wrote the book, The Real Anthony Fauci, was he sued? No. He wasn't sued, right? And the reason he wasn't sued was because he didn't write anything that was incorrect, and it's the same thing like with Trump, with the stuff like what you're talking about with Epstein. I mean, Trump is all about that kind of stuff, dude. He's made a shit ton of money suing people. And if there was no there, you can bet your sweet ass. You can bet your sweet ass that whoever the hell had something to say about him being a pedophile or a rapist or something like that would be getting sued into oblivion. Into oblivion. It's not like he couldn't hire the freaking lawyers to do it. The guy's made $1.5 billion in insider trading in the last year and a half, more than every single other politician in American history combined to the Trump family in the last year and a half.
Right.
I mean, it's like, dude, it's a never-ending barrage of lies and manipulation and bullshit. And 100% he would sue. 100% he would sue, dude. Of course you're right. Like, yeah, that is one of the easiest ways to tell whether or not somebody's telling the truth about something is if the individual they're going after sues them or not. Because if they don't and they have the means to do it, you can bet your ass there's some there. There's some there. There's some stuff they're like, we don't want this. Because you know what there's going to be with suing somebody? Discovery. You know what I'm saying? There's going to be subpoenas and there's going to be fucking discovery, bro. And if you have subpoenas and discovery, all of a sudden some shit comes out that you don't want to come out because that opens up that Pandora's box. And if you're a guy like Trump, you're like, I'll just keep my 1.5 billion of insider trading plus all my other money. Like I'm not going to sue him.
Yep.
So yeah, I agree with you 100%, dude. I think you're 100% accurate on that. Fucking 100%. I think it's one of the best ways to tell who's telling the truth is by following. Because they always say, right, follow the money, bro. Follow the money. That's one of the ways to follow the money right there. So yeah, I agree with you 100%, dude. So let's get into that stuff, dude. Let's get into the stuff you were talking about. Joel's got some pretty interesting shit. And then before, I know that we teased, like I said, the Sumerian kings list and like all the Greek traditions, Native American traditions, like, all Hindu traditions. Actually, India is real wild with the history stuff. India is fucking crazy, dude. If you're out there, like I highly recommend looking into all those crazy, crazy structures in India that were built right into the rock. I mean, it wasn't transported rock. They were built into the sides of mountains. The sides, huge structures and like temples and dude, like crazy, crazy statues that like you can't mess that up, dude. You mess it up, like there's no coming back from it. You know what I'm saying? Like everything is perfectly symmetrical. Everything is wildly huge, beautiful beyond anything that we make today. We make bullshit today, bro. Like take a look at our cities, bro. Like look at our buildings, our structure, our infrastructure. It's fucking crumbling, dude. Like our buildings look like shit. Our infrastructure looks like shit. We spend all of our money overseas. We don't reinvest anything here. And you look at some of these ancient civilizations, dude, with these massive megalithic works, and you're like, God, it's so admirable. Like however they did it, however the fuck they did it, whether they just did it with a copper chisel, they didn't do it with a copper chisel. But it's just like we said, a copper chisel going against granite is the same thing as trying to write your name on a tree with fucking using cardboard. Using a piece of cardboard to write your name on a tree. You know what I mean? Like that's the same thing as using a copper chisel and like a harder stone. But anyway, dude, let's hear some of that cool stuff you got about Mary and like, whatever else you got there. And we'll kind of riff off that.
So what I'm going to kind of talk about is the Book of Mary, or the Gospel of Mary, as a lot of people may know it. And also when throughout history, the church consolidated the Bible and how that coincided with like power grabs and political movements and nationalism, whether it was from the ancient times to more recent times, and how often the consolidation of the Bible, which I don't realize a lot of people know how many times it was consolidated or changed even within the last 70 years. So I'm just going to talk a little bit on that because I think it has a lot to do with the Book of Enoch being removed and controlling the narrative of how they wanted people to perceive their religion, and also how they needed you to be in shame and gear and fear and to worship somebody who could fix that for you versus giving you the power or another option to fix it for yourself. And I think that's always kind of been my narrative with religion. And so going into the Gospel of Mary, this is a historical text attributed to Mary Magdalene. Some say it should have been included in the Bible, and that it is an early early patriarchal church leaders deliberately excluded and suppressed female leadership to protect the male-only church hierarchy. And that's some things that the Book of Mary did, is it gave vindication of a female authoritarian figure. It also talked about finding the light within yourself and not through a higher being. So a lot of theologians and secular historians argue that the text offers an authentic alternative stream of early Christianity that was silenced by the dominant Orthodox fraction. And this is some of the arguments that support the people who are pro the Book of Mary or think it was excluded for certain reasons. One is the vindication of the female authority. In the text, Mary Magdalene is depicted as a primary leader. When the male disciples are weeping and terrified after Jesus' death, Mary steps up to comfort them and lead them. Peter even explicitly asks her to share the teachings of Jesus that were hidden from the men. Advocates argue that this reflects early Christian reality where women held authority based on spiritual character rather than gender. So one of the other arguments is Mary's status as an apostle to the apostles. Even within the traditional Bible, Mary Magdalene isn't established as the very first witness to the resurrection of Jesus. Proponents of her gospel argue that since the apostolic eyewitness testimony was all the primary qualification for the New Testament and the canon, that her personal account and unique relationship with Jesus should have naturally earned her text a place in the Bible. So their argument is, like, for when you talk about like the book of Matthew, Luke, Paul, John, those are all personal accounts of Jesus, and that's how they were vindicated, because they said so. Essentially, they said, this was my account. And so the people who think this should be in the Bible, say like this was her first person account, so why wasn't this in the Bible? And then the second is a focus on inner peace over fear and judgment. And this is probably where I lean into this the most, because I think some people believe in dogmas and things in the sky when they should be concentrating on their self and what's going on in their home, versus hating the neighbor, the immigrant. Fix yourself, make yourself right, make yourself better, and everything else will get better. And I do think some people find that in faith. I know people who found faith and it's saved their lives. So I'm not like, this isn't me hating on Christianity, but I do think if this book was added to the Bible, it might be more impactful for some. But anyways, so the focus on inner peace over fear and judgment. This text offers a radically different theology. Instead of a physical apocalyptical end to the world with cosmic judgment like the book of Revelations, Jesus in the Gospel of Mary teaches that salvation is an internal spiritual journey of the soul. It emphasizes freedom from external laws and inner peace. Scholars like Karen King suggest that this teaching was buried because it freed people from the burden of guilt, shame, and blind obedience to the church and leaders. And you could break that down in a lot of ways. Like, I could go on and on about that view, but that's where I really I feel like the teaching, finding your salvation through somebody else versus having to worship a figure. I think obviously that the church was not going to like that. And so this is an argument why people in Christianity, in mainstream Christianity, say the book shouldn't be in there. And a lot of it is based on the timeline. So this book was, and a timeline, and like it was a Gnostic text, so and it's the same as a Book of Enoch. So these books, the Book of Enoch, the Book of Mary, certain groups of Christianity through the Middle East, from Syria to Egypt, parts of Palestine, like they followed this book. It wasn't mainstream though. It was mainstream to a point, but it wasn't the doctrine, and so their argument, because it had any a Gnostic text that it shouldn't be in the Bible because it wasn't mainstream enough, even though there was large groups throughout the region who did follow it. And that goes back to like the consolidation of power. They needed everybody to think the same way, do the same thing. If you had different ideas, it didn't fit their narrative. Even if it was a sect of Christianity, it didn't quite fit their sect, so they just eradicated it. The argument why it should be to understand the full debate, historians point out mainstream early Christians did not see its exclusion as a conspiracy, but as a defense to the core theology. The main reason it was excluded. It's a Gnostic text. Mainstream church fathers reject it because it heavily relies on Gnosticism, a belief that teaching that the physical world is inherent of evil and that salvation comes through secret Gnostic knowledge rather than faith of Christ's physical crucifixion and resurrection. And there's some of that in the Book of Enoch too, that there's a lot of same as far as it being a Gnostic. It was written too late, and I think this would be their best argument. The text was composed in the 2nd century CE, long after Mary Magdalene and the original apostles has died. The New Traditional Testament books were written in the 1st century. So that would be, I think that'd be their best argument. But also, this book was never found fully. So they've only found segments of this book. And I also speculate if this book had an older version that was lost when Constantine's library burnt. So, and that's some things too, like people forget to mention is Constantine, the consolidation, the canon, that all happened under Constantine. And he had a massive library of that whole region of religion and faith, and that all burnt down. So there was massive amounts of stuff that we lost within that fire. And since we found the Dead Sea Scrolls and other things like that, I'm wondering if this is something that maybe
and
was lost.
Something else to add to that, Joel, really quick.
Go ahead.
Something else to add to that. Like, it's also, if you think about, I always think about these things. I'm like, listen, like, fuck. Like how it's so hard to tell how far back you get dates on original text, and well, they're not original text. Everything's a copy of a copy. You know what I mean? Most of this stuff that we find is a copy of something, a copy of a copy of a copy.
Right.
And it's kind of like Enoch, right? Enoch 1 goes back to 200 BC. That's the earliest copy we have. But obviously the traditions go back orally. And I guarantee you there's someplace somewhere,
right,
whether it was burned in a fire or whether it's still waiting to be discovered, like it was the Dead Sea Scrolls in a cave. It's like, dude, the burning of the Library of Alexandria was,
right.
God knows how much we lost when that happened. Also, like you're talking about with Constantine, also when in the fall of Jerusalem, a lot of people don't realize this. So in 70 AD, when the Romans basically conquered Jerusalem from the uprising, they burned a bunch of libraries that had really, really ancient, ancient Aramaic, Hebrew, Greek texts. They go way, 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 way back. And it's like there's no record really of what was in those libraries. And so it drives me crazy that we see that even in modern times right now, like with what's going on in Lebanon, right? With Israel bombing Lebanon and hitting holy sites and ancient archaeological sites that are part of like the world archaeological protection stuff. And to destroy history like that, God, it's just a human thing that drives me out of my mind, dude, to think about, especially as somebody who investigates history this much. And I think about the Book of Mary Magdalene, and it dates to like 200 CE. But it's like, that's a copy. I guarantee you that's a fucking copy.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? It's not, is it the original text? I mean, probably not. More than likely not.
And the biggest thing is those people didn't want it there, so they could consolidate it. They could hide it until it was discovered, like there's so many ways, and that's the whole thing. And that's when you come to find out. And this was like this whole question of Enoch and Mary, because I probably wasn't really into this stuff until probably I talked a lot of shit about Christianity and couldn't like point to facts. I knew there was something. I knew the history and it was about power and stuff like that. But like, once you actually start digging and realizing like how many times the Bible was consolidated, how many things were left out to fit a narrative that fitted like nationalism and power and getting people to come together, which I'm not saying is a bad thing, but if it is when it's to hate somebody else, you know? And so like right now I want like talking about the consolidation, and I'm going to go into a little bit of history of the consolidation of the Bible, and all the way back from the canon to as far back as 1950. So the consolidation of the Christian Bible was never a purely detached theological exercise. It was deeply intertwined with the consolidation of political power, empire building, and nascent forms of nationalism throughout ancient and modern history. Defining what was the Holy Scripture simultaneously defined who was inside the circle of political power and who what the enemy of the state was. And that is pretty consistent with the consolidations of the Bible. Here's a timeline of the biblical canon directly aligns with political consolidation and nationalism. So in the first 3 centuries of Christianity, hundreds of texts, including various gospels, apocalypsals, and epitaphs, circulated independently among decentralized communities. The drive to finalize a single authoritative Bible directly tracked the rise of Christianity as an imperial state apparatus. Imperial unity, 4th century. Before the Empire, Constantine legalized Christianity with the Edict of Milan in 313 CE, there was no urgent political need for uniform texts. However, when Constantine thought to use Christianity as a stabilizing, unifying glue for a fractured Roman Empire, theological diversity became a political liability. So essentially saying this empire has just fractured. We need everybody to think alike. So they started consolidating the Bible. The ordering of the Bibles, 331 CE. To enforce uniformity, Constantine commissioned the Exubus of Cyrus. I'm going to fuck up all those words.
Dude, these names are rough, bro. Don't worry about it.
Yeah. To produce 50 magnificent copies of scripture for the churches of Constantinople. These required a concrete sorting of accepted texts from the heretical ones, aligning with the boundaries of the book and the boundaries of imperial law. State-sanctioned canon, and this is really when the Bible like really became the Bible, was the canon. State-sanctioned canon, late 4th century. In 367 CE, Athanasius of Alexandria published the first listing of our modern 27-book Testament, shortly after the Roman Empire declared Nicene Christianity as a sole state religion. Regional councils like the Synod of Hippo in 393 CE and the Council of Carthage in 397 CE finalized the canon. Then you have the Vulgate as a political tool. Pope Damascus commissioned Jerome to translate the text into the Latin Vulgate. This was created a singular, standardized, bureaucratic, and spiritual language for the Western Empire, consolidating the church's power as a Roman state disintegrated. Anybody outside the canon was labeled a heretic and rendering them as readers and political rebels against the state. So essentially, if you didn't believe in this Bible, you were a heretic, you were going against the state, you were going against a religion. So this is going to go a little bit more recent history, and we're going to talk to early medieval history and to the rise of nationalism, kind of. So during the Protestant Reformation, the consolidation of the Bible shifted from an imperial tool to a nationalist weapon used to break away from the imperial structures. The The Protestant Canon and National Sovereignty, 16th century. Martin Luther, Consolidation, a revised Protestant canon by removing the apocryphy of the Old Testament, by translating the Bible into vernacular German. He was not only just democrating religion, he also forged a distinct German national identity. German prince protected Luther because his vernacular Bible allowed them to consolidate local political power and stop sending tax revenues to Rome. So essentially, they used the Bible to stop sending tax money to Rome, and it was a German Bible apparently, which I never knew that. I knew this is like really up until this point of me doing this research, the King James Bible was really the only like version of like I knew about that. So it was interesting to find all these consolidate. And I knew a little bit about the Old Testament and the New Testament, but so this going into that, the King James Bible and state power, 1611. In England, the consolidation of the scripture was explicitly a matter of state security. And so I keep saying state. It's not about religion. It's about the state and making sure everybody's on the same fucking page. King James I commissioned King James Version, or the KJV, accounted to the Geneva Bible. The Geneva Bible contained marginal notes written by Calvinists that questioned the divine right of kings. James consolidated a state-approved translation that removed these political dangerous notes, cementing the authority of the British crown over the church and the state. So essentially, he wrote the Bible, took out anything that was questioning a king or some of the stuff that was questioning a king, so it gave him the power of a god per se.
Oh yeah, it was intentionally done history so he would have. It was he was for absolute control. Like he didn't like the Bible that was circulating because it didn't give enough. The Bible that was actually circulating at the time was called the Geneva Bible, and
that's what my research.
He didn't like because it talked about tyrannical kings, about how kings can be tyrannical and authoritarian and not do the bidding of the people. And blah, 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 blah. And then he started using what was called like the Bishop's Bible, I believe, something to that point. And that more mirrored the lines of like, kind of like how the King's Bible was eventually going to, like that we know today. You know what I mean? What kind of came about. Right. And so, yeah, it was 100% about consolidating political power and then basically saying that the king is the all authority, kind of like God's appointed. You remember how the kings, especially in medieval times, they're always appointed by God, right? And the Catholic Church would be like their right hand figure, pretty much. And so it was like they couldn't get on the bad side of the church and vice versa. And they were like a direct descendant or specifically chosen by God, and you could not question that authority. So if they killed you, raped your wife, stole your property, kidnapped your children, conscripted them for warfare, like it was all God's will. It was God's will because it was the king's will. So yeah, 100% on that.
Yeah. So here's a little getting closer into the modern timeline. Colonialism and the civilization mission. So 18th, 19th century. European empires used the consolidation of the Bible as a cultural weapon by enforcing the translation of specific closed canon into an indigenous language. Colonial powers distributed local and oral traditions, law systems, and spiritualities. Accepting the consolidation Bible was synonymous with submitting to the legal and political sovereignty of the occupying European nation. So essentially, they're giving a Bible translated in the locals' language and saying, like, hey, you need to believe in this, and if you don't, we're still going to take over. Then you start talking about America. Manifest destiny in the United States. In the 19th century America, specific interpretations of the consolidation's biblical narrative, particularly the Old Testament narrative of the Israelites conquering the Promised Land, were weaponized to justify manifest destiny. The state used biblical language to legitimize the violent displacement of Native Americans and the consolidation of white Anglo-Saxon Protestants' national identity. So essentially they use the same things that the Israelites used, and that story to say like we're taking over the Holy Land. This is our land. This land belongs to us because we are holy. Therefore, it is ours. So a little bit, I'm going to talk about the.
You ever heard of the curse of Ham?
In Africa? Good, no, but go into it.
Oh, so that's like, that was another thing you talk about. And like, we're seeing it today with the expansion of like what, Israel's doing to the Palestinians, Lebanon, all that kind of stuff. Like that there's justification for conquest for all these different reasons and killing these peoples. Cause if you look at the Old Testament, dude, there's countless stories, and it's not just like Jewish people or Hebrews or the sons and daughters of Israel or the Israelites. There's all these names for the Jewish people in the Old Testament. There's multiple names, but it's like in a lot of those wars, dude, when you read into a lot of those wars, it was Jewish on Jewish crime, Jewish on Jewish battles, wars, hate,
Right.
where there were literally like 5,000, 10,000 plus Jews killed by other Jews because God said that these Jews specifically were not adhering to his principle or his law, or like you think about like the golden calf incident, like different things like that. And it was like green on green crime. Like in the military, it's like if you have a shooting that's friendly fire, it's green on green. It's like this is a green on green stuff with them. And the curse of Ham, it's basically it's pretty much the narrative that justified the enslavement of black people and what they did to the Native Americans. And it's kind of like,
well,
there was, yeah, go ahead.
I mean, that with the curse of Ham, it sounds very similar to the apartheid in South Africa in the 20th century. The Afro-Franken National Party used the Dutch Reformed Church reading of the Bible to provide theological justification for the, am I saying that right? Apartheid,
yeah. That's
anyways, right. The biblical narrative of separation of nations and the Tower of Babel were used to consolidate total minority political power and force strict racial segregation under the guise of a divine mandate. So it's essentially somebody using the Bible, saying what they think it means or what it was rewritten to say, to segregate people, be racist, whatever else, and that's, I just think it's really ironic that this has always been on the midst of a king or somebody trying to gain more power, trying to brainwash people, trying to push. I'm not saying everything that's in the Bible is bad either. I'm just, they use it to fit their narrative. So coming in the most recent history of changing the Bible.
Hold on really quick too.
Go ahead.
Really quick too, when it comes about the curse of Ham, he was like, there's no mention in the Bible of like, in the Bible itself of like skin color, race, African descent, like all these kinds of things. But like what was kind of used, like Ham was like the father of Canaan, and there was something about him being naked and being seen naked. This was during the time of Noah, right? And like the descendants of Ham pretty much became like the Africans, the Muslims, like those kinds of people, right? The undesirables, right? Eventually. And so as time went on, the curse of Ham basically meant that you were a descendant of that side of the family tree. Do you know what I'm saying? Like that side of the family tree was, it's in the book of Genesis. Like there's, I'm trying to remember exactly how this goes, but it was that part was used because as the families from Noah branched off, like the one son went and they kind of established Christianity, Judaism, and eventually Christianity, and the other one descended into like, and this doesn't say it in the Bible, bro. This is like what you're talking about, a reinterpretation, right? You're talking about a reinterpretation that's incorrect. And during the time of slavery, they would call African slaves descendants of Ham. Like, in other words, they weren't human because they weren't descended from the right kid of Noah, if that makes sense. Because one side of the family tree, started Judaism, eventually Christianity, and it bled right into the Anglo-Saxon culture, right? Kind of like European Western culture. And then the other side, Ham, like went into Africa and eventually became Islam and these things. And so they would basically say that we're justified in enslaving peoples like the Africans or killing them like the Native Americans and taking their land because they're not actually human and they're not chosen. It's the curse of Ham. And so, yeah.
Right.
Anyway, that's kind of where that comes from, but there's a lot to it. But in the Bible, the crazy thing about the Bible, dude, is the Bible doesn't speak to that at all, like that at all. Like it does not say anywhere that what their race was, what their eventual religion was going to be, right? That they deserve to be enslaved. Like none of that is in the Bible. None of it. That was all.
Well,
you have populations. You got to think coming up. Most people were not literate. They weren't literate, and plus the Bible was in Latin, dude. It took a long time, for the Bible not to be in Latin, and there was a huge fight between when they first wanted to translate the Bible from Latin to English, because the priest and the pastors and all those people knew that if the Bible was translated into English, that more people would be able to read it and then have their own conclusions, and that was a huge threat. There's been a lot of these tiny little micro wars about stuff like that, and the Latin to English thing was another microcosm of what you're talking about, where they're intentionally trying to deceive the populace so you can it's like the King James Bible, right? So you can maintain power, control, and authority, which includes taxation, right? Which then equates to wealth and power. So, just wanted to say that.
Well. And some of the richest people in the world have been tied directly to like big churches and old religious families. So there's that as well. So I'm going to talk about some of the newer stuff. And this is something what I don't think a lot of people realize. And this happened in So this happened in 1946 and 1952 when this started happening, and it's the homosexuality and the Bible and the controversy that lies in that conversation. The most significant change of the English Bible occurred when the Revised Standard Version was publicized. The New Testament in 1940. This is the New Testament in 1946 and the full Bible in 1952. This version was the first English translation to explicitly insert the word homosexual into the biblical text. So you have, this is a verse, this is what they're talking about. You have Quran. Yep.
You said 1952, right?
The full.
God, that's so recent, dude.
Yes, correct.
That's so recent.
I know.
Recent. Wow.
Well, and so it was verses of the Corinthians 6:9-10 and Timothy 1:10. The original Greek. The RVS translator combined two distinct Greek words, malakoi, which traditionally means soft or effeminate, and asenokiokol, which mean men who lie with males. So the shift is previous versions, like the King James versions, translated these as effeminate and the abusers of themselves with mankind. The RVS replaced both of those singular with the modern psychological term homosexuality. So at first, the first Bible was essentially talking about people who are molesting kids. I find that real ironic how the church took that out of the fucking Bible and just said homosexuality. And so this word wasn't even in the Bible. They weren't even talking about gays. They were talking about molesting kids and somebody like making that crime against themselves because it's dishonoring to yourself. And then it became homosexuality. So essentially, a lot of people think it weaponized that, and I'm going to go into that a little bit. So this is where the cultural war ties into.
If you think about, it definitely weaponized. Like if you think about the Catholic Church, right, and the problems they've had with, obviously, massive problems for 1,000 years with raping children. I mean, just a huge problem within priests of the Catholic Church. And there's been tons, dude. This happened in Michigan. This happened all over Europe. People can go look this up, man. There's like in the backs of old churches, in like the quads, the big yards, the grass fields, where they've had to dig up those fields, and they found dead babies all over the place. Because in a lot of places too, the priests were raping the nuns, impregnating them, aborting the babies, killing the babies, and then burying them behind the church. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That's true. On top of the child molestation thing. And so it's kind of weird. Like, it's ironic how they would pull out, and you see this kind of with the Epstein class, right? A little bit. Like, there's something weird about these people that have infatuations with kids. And like the lengths they're willing to go to cover their asses with that. And to pull out the fact that child rape is bad, and just remove that. Why wouldn't you just say, Joel, why wouldn't you just say homosexuality and child rape? Why would you exchange
for real if that's
child rape with
what
homosexuality?
You wanted to say, yeah. Well,
you know what
and
I'm
this
saying?
is
like, why wouldn't you just include homosexuality?
So,
but they don't. They didn't. They cut it out. And then they included homosexuality.
They took out.
And it's like, that's done with intention.
They took out two words that neither meant homosexuality, and they put homosexuality to replace them. And this is here's an argument that progressive scholars and advocates say that in 1946 the mistranslation shifted culture. They argue that the word that I have a hard time pronouncing, the asen kokotaya, originally referred to expletives, abusers, or somebody who has a pedophile relationship with a boy, or a non-consensual same-sex union. So it's essentially somebody who's raping somebody or molesting a kid is what that word means. And that's our argument, is that they took that word out and replaced it with homosexual, so it shifted the narrative to that. The warning ignored. In 1959, a 21-year-old seminary student named David Sheldon. It is. And this is a different warning, but I do think it weaponized it. And right after, like, coming out all this, you had the AIDS epidemic, all the hatred towards gays, and, and not directly after this, but the following 20 years after this, you had to deal with all that. And this kind of, the timing weaponized towards them perfectly, not whether that was intentional or not, but the seed was already planted, which made that much worse, and people were getting it and scared to come out and everything else, But so here's in 1959, a 21-year-old seminary student named David Sheldon Farron wrote a letter to the RVS Translation Committee pointing out homosexual was a dangerous mistranslation. He warned it would be used as a sacred weapon against a defenseless minority. The committee actually admitted he had a point and changed the word to sexual perverts, but by that time it was too late and the update never really happened. And it did. There's a small section of Bibles where it was changed to sexually pervert, but it didn't really take hold. So I think that's pretty interesting. I also think, like, in that same time period, that's when we put in the Pledge of Allegiance, we put the phrase "under God," in the Pledge of Allegiance. We also, Eisenhower signed an official law declaring "In God We Trust" to be the official national motto, replacing E Pluribus Unum, which is out of many, one. I can't fucking read Greek or whatever that is. So yeah, these things were all changed to, like, I don't think a lot of people, they always fall back to when America was created, and it should be just like it was when we created in the Constitution. And it's been changed a lot of times to fit a narrative of what's happening. And then when we talk about our constitutional fathers, and this is the last bit, and I'm done with my segment, and I'm just going to go what's been happening to Christianity in America has been kind of really disturbing to me. And the Christian nationalist movement that's been happening, I think, is just really uprooting what Christianity was supposed to be and just giving it a bad name, because there is a lot of good Christian people out there and they get tied up in the nationalist movement, which I think is unfair. And when people go back to our founding fathers and say this was a Christian nation, I'm just going to go through a list of our founding fathers and what they believed in. And
we talked about this too, about how
you could
they're far more deist. Yeah, the founding fathers were far more deist than they were anything else. They're based on reason and individual thought decision-making, primarily reason.
There's really only one that I would say was devout throughout his time and hasn't changed. So you have George Washington. He was theistic deist. He attended the episcopal churches, but rarely took communion and preferred using non-denominational terms for God, like providence or the great author. You have John Adams. He was a Unitarian. Raised a Congregationalist, he later rejected the doctrine of Trinity and believed in a benevolent God focused on morality rather than dogma. Thomas Jefferson was a Christian deist and a Unitarian. He famously edited the New Testament, the Jefferson Bible, and removed all the miracles, resurrections, and viewing Jesus as strictly as a great moral teacher. You have Benjamin Franklin, a deist. He believed in a creator who governed the world through providence and value the social unity of religion, though he doubted the divinity of Jesus. James Madison was a Episcopalian deist leaning. He was raised in the Church of England and was a fierce advocate for the strict separation of church and state, keeping his personal theological views private. Alexander Hamilton was am I saying that right? Episcopalian? Yep. He was Episcopalian. Episcopal. Episcopalian. Jesus
Episcopalian.
Christ. Yeah. So when I'm saying Episcopalian, I mean Episcopalian.
Episcopalian. Yep.
Alexander Hamilton was Episcopalian. He was a conventional believer in youth. He became largely unorthodox during his political peak and returned to the Orthodox Christian faith later in his life. So John Jay was really the only one who would say what you would call like an Orthodox, and he was a Orthodox Episcopalian. Unlike many of his contemporaries, he was a deeply devoted traditional Christian who served the president of the American Bible Society, who served as president of the American Bible Society.
You know who gets left out a lot with the founding fathers, but was extraordinarily relevant and should be included, is Thomas Paine. And Thomas Paine wrote The Age of Reason, and he also wrote the book that basically kicked off the revolution. Damn it, Sean U. Daly would kick my ass for not remembering the name of this book. But Thomas Paine, if you want to read a book that will light your ass hairs on fire when it comes to understanding how the founding fathers thought about Christianity and pretty much the divinity of Jesus and what reason really meant, read The Age of Reason. Because it is one of those books where he didn't even publish it all because he thought the church was going to kill him. And Thomas Jefferson told him that the church was going to fucking kill him if he published all of that book.
Right.
He did segments and left a lot out until he was a lot older. You know what I mean? And he had a lot less to worry about. But he's another one of those guys where he questions a lot of the divinity stuff. And like, he doesn't necessarily believe that God acts. He gave mankind reason and the ability to independently think and act. Free will, right? And doesn't necessarily act on behalf of humanity. He lets humanity kind of rationalize and work it through itself. You know what I mean? That's a lot of how the belief structure works. And so, yeah, that's another great one. But real quick too, before we get into, I found that there's a few more where there was a lot of stuff that changed, dude, in a lot of in the Bible, and I got some examples here. So, like the Gospel of Mark. The Gospel of Mark originally ended in chapter 16, verse 8. In chapter 16, verse 8, and it basically just said, with the women fleeing the empty tomb in fear, like the empty tomb. They just saw the empty tomb. They fled in fear. Okay. Well, like in the 2nd century, apparently, so like 100 years after Mark had been written, they added 12 extra verses to Mark. A lot of people might not know that. So basically, from chapter 16, verse 9, all the way through verse 20, in extending 12 verses to include appearances of the disciples and creating, they wanted to create a longer ending to it. They just didn't think his ending was basically long enough. Also in the Gospel of John. So these are the main Gospels, bro. Matthew, Mark, Luke, John. So in the Gospel of John, there's the adultery story. And I didn't actually really know this. You know, the one quote, this is really famous, bro. Let him who is without sin cast the first stone. That's John chapter 7, verse 53. Okay. It was not in the original book. That whole adultery scene of the girl getting thrown down on the ground and the men going to stone her to death, and Jesus saying, those without sin cast the first stone. That's not in the original version of John. It's not. And that's pretty freaking interesting, right? Because that is a huge, but it does not appear in any of the oldest Greek manuscripts of John. So in the earliest versions of John, the earliest versions that we have of John do not include that story. It did not include that story. It was added later by a secondary author or a secondary editor and into that story, which doesn't that, dude, that's kind of crazy because that's the story that's cited all the time, right? All the time. Also, here's another one, the Book of Jeremiah.
100%.
The Book of Jeremiah. Okay. In the ancient Greek translation, which is called the Septuagint, there's a lot of stuff out there about the Septuagint. Like when I put out a short on the Book of Enoch, right? And I have people commenting on there, basically, even people that are my friends, like legitimate friends that I serve with, basically saying that this is heresy, this is not accepted canon. Like even one of them going so far as to say that the earliest that the books date to was 500 AD, which is like Googleably wrong. You can just Google it and it's wrong.
Yeah.
And like basically that even reading the Book of Enoch was heresy. Like even willing to read it and even explore it would make you kind of like burn in hell, you know? And so the Book of Jeremiah, okay, represents the older, shorter than the traditional Hebrew Bible. The chapters are in a completely different order, apparently. Like in the original version, it's a shorter version, first of all. So in the original version of Jeremiah, the chapters are in a different order than they are now. And it was heavily expanded, reordered, and padded over centuries, literally centuries. Okay. Here's another one, Isaiah. Okay. Written at, they said that there's 3 authors around about 200 years of this one. And that one has been written and changed and had all kinds, like all the way up to the 6th century, apparently. All the way up to the 6th century, even when it talks about the Babylonian exile has been changed. And there's one over here with David. Yeah, right here. So in the Book of Chronicles. So books 1 and 2 of the Chronicles are explicit, like intentional rewriting of the older books of Samuel and Kings. Here's the edit. Okay. Written after the Babylonian exile, the author of Chronicles systematically edited out negative stories to paint a more ideal, like theological history of King David. For example, this is a perfect example. Chronicles completely deleted King David's affair. He had an affair with a gal, and that gal's name was Bathsheba. And also the murder of a guy named Uriah, Uriah. And King David murdered that dude. Murdered him, straight up cold blood murdered him, and had an affair with this Bathsheba gal. And it was completely written out of Chronicles. And the whole reason they did that is because they wanted King David to be seen as like a flawless theological king. You know what I mean? Because Jerusalem kind of started with King David, even though Jerusalem as a city-state was around for thousands of years before it was ever a Jewish city-state under King David, who originally made it like the original Jewish city-state. But those are other examples. Those are old books in the Bible, stuff that was, and it's not even recent. Those were changed over centuries, slowly, like expanding them, changing them, making certain people out to be different than they actually were. Yeah, it's kind of like you have a hard time understanding what to think about that, because you're like, what can you really believe? Well, what you can really believe is you go to the original text. That's what I always say, dude. Being a historian, I'm a huge believer in primary sources. Primary sources are hard to find. Primary sources for those out there are original writings, right? For example, if Joel wrote the Chronicles of fucking Joel, right? And then I rewrote the Chronicles of Joel, my book, what I wrote, would be a secondary source. Okay, because the primary source would be Joel's writing. The secondary source would be my writing, because what could I do? I could change a few things, right? I could change a few things from like the Chronicles of Joel, and I could change some of the Chronicles of Joel to either make him look better or worse or whatever. Add a monster, fucking add whatever. And so it's like, I always tell people, man, like, investigate the primary sources. And if you can't read ancient Greek, ancient Aramaic, ancient Hebrew, which most people can't, like, there are some really good AI models out there now, and there's actually very, very few people in the entire world that can read ancient Greek. Very few. And what we're finding out, dude, a lot of these people have been on the Danny Jones show. The Danny Jones show is a big podcast out there, and he's had a lot of Greek translators on his show. And they talk a lot about the Bible, dude. And like a lot of different misinterpretations of ancient Greek in the Bible that were way, way misinterpreted. This is just one example, and I'll kind of just leave it at this. Christ, the word Christ. Do you know that Christ in ancient Greek means like anointed or anointment, like being anointed? Like that's what you could be Christed. Like anybody out there could be Christed. Like you're anointed. You're like an anointed one. Or like if you receive oils, right? If you get anointed with oils, you get Christed. And so like in ancient, truly ancient Greek, way before Jesus, it's like the word Christ itself was used all the time. It was used a lot in pharmaceutical books and different things like that, where people would be Christed and they would be called Christ afterwards. And so anyway, there's some really crazy mistranslations in the Bible. And when these things were originally translated, dude, I mean, you're talking about 2,000 years ago for some of this stuff. I mean, and then on top of it, we didn't have, even for more recent translations, we don't have the knowledge that we do now to really understand what all of these ancient, I'm talking fucking ancient writings and cultures and societies that we cannot identify with as Americans at all, and how they used words. And like Netflix and chill today, right, is basically hooking up with a chick. I know that. Right. It's like, how would that be interpreted 500 years from now? Netflix and chill. It would mean something completely different. Would you actually know that at one point in time in the year 2025 or 2026 that Netflix and chill meant hooking up with a girl? You know what I'm saying?
Right.
There's constantly evolving.
Which hooking up with a girl means having sex with a girl, you know, like it just keeps going and going and going.
Exactly.
Our language as it's evolving.
It just keeps going.
And I think too, with like all this stuff with the Bible and the consolidations, like you're talking about, like if I wrote Joel's Testament and then you rewrote it and you rewrote it and then you showed it to your king and he's like, no, I don't like that story. You know, like that doesn't fit in a narrative. Let's put this one. Let's take that out. So like, it's just like, and that's where, and then you get Yeah, and then you get so removed from what Christianity was to now that there's people who are white as fucking an alabaster eggshell who have no tie to actually where Christians came from and now can't even relate to a Christian who's getting bombed in another country from a holy war that's never ended. And that's like the crazy thing to me is like Christians in America, they see a white Jesus who looks like a fucking hippie. They don't see brown people. They don't see fucking any of that. They see white. They see white Christian nationalism.
Yeah, I was going to bring that exact thing up, man. Like you go into churches or people's houses, especially Mormons. This seems to be really, really true with Mormons. Like you get the Anglo-Saxon, blonde-haired, blue-eyed Viking Jesus. Like there's a Viking Jesus hanging on the wall, and you're like, do you know anything about Middle Eastern people at all?
Right.
Have you seen a movie on the war on terrorism? Even like, how could you possibly like make Jesus literally look like a Scandinavian Viking? Kind of, But anyway, dude, hey, I got to roll, bro. I got to get boys to football practice. We're switching from football or baseball to football, at least for two of them. And so I got to roll, man. I'm actually probably going to get them there a little bit late. And so I got to cut it, homie. But this is good. And then next time, dude, we're going to talk about the Sumerian Kings list, all this other stuff that extends right into the Watchers. It's all the same stuff as the Enochian Watchers, and it's all over the world. And we're going to hammer that one out at the beginning of next week, people. You're going to fucking like that one. I'll tell you right now. So I love you, dude. Have yourself a good day, man.
Love you, brother. Take it easy, guys.